When you come to my garden in the middle of summer, you might find that all the branches on these trees are pruned, but some seem to be left too long. Hey, come on, it's the middle of summer, you should be pruning these trees, don't let these branches extend. These overly long branches all have one thing in common. And the thing that they have in common is that they were not accidentally left in place when I was doing a poor pruning job. These are actually sacrifice branches. So how many reasons do you know for sacrifice branches in bonsai? And do you know why sacrifice branch might not be the right name? In this video, sacrifice branches in bonsai, 6 reasons why you should use them. Sacrifice branches left, right and center. At first, when you look at a branch like this, you're wondering, why do you keep a branch like this on a tree if you want it to become bonsai? The answer, my friends, is swinging in the wind. A very common way of using sacrifice branches for developing trunks is by just letting a trunk grow very tall and chop back very low. Severe pruning, a trunk chop, that's basically nothing more than an enormous sacrifice branch. So that's the first way that you can recognize a sacrifice branch and how you can use it. It is basically just fattening up of the trunk. Now a trunk chop gives us the reason for the second purpose of a sacrifice branch. Basically, what you can do with a sacrifice branch is help heal big cuts. By letting the top branch grow tall, you create a lot of energy and a lot of power in these main trunks. That means that wounds have a lot of energy and a lot of material to close itself. Additionally, by letting the top grow tall, there's a lot of wood formed in the trunk itself. It fattens up, which further aids in closing the wounds. So having a sacrifice branch on your trunks will enormously help in closing the cuts. But be careful, understand how it works. If I let a sacrifice branch grow here tall, then a wound here above it will not heal. The sap flow between the sacrifice and the roots, that is the section where the healing takes place. It's best to have your sacrifice branch right over the wound, so not on the other side of the trunk. So you get maximum sap flow between the roots and the sacrifice branch over the wounded area or the chopped area. That effect you can see quite clearly here. This was an original trunk chop. It died back a little bit, saved fortunately here by the side branches. And this is a sacrifice branch which has been growing for the last 3 years. You can see how here the edges of the wound have started to close over the cut area. And I have no doubt that within 2 years this whole area will be covered. I need to care for this wound a little bit more, peel down the bark, add cut paste, but then it will close quite quickly. So following the sacrifice branches down along the trunk, we get to the third reason why we can use sacrifice branches. What you can tell here very clearly is what I said already before. The place where you have your sacrifice branch attached up to the roots is where the trunk thickens. This lower sacrifice branch aids in developing the lower trunk, but not the upper trunk. This way, it adds to creating taper. Do note, however, that you will get a fairly big cut wound here on the side of the trunk, so it will be a little bit difficult to heal, but getting taper works in this way. If I now let this one grow as well, maybe next year, this fattens up, but this doesn't, and this stays thin, and you get a nice tapered bonsai. Now, speaking of branches, of course, here we have a top sacrifice, and this is really long. But here at the lower branches, I left some sacrifice branches in spring as well. These are in place to aid in thickening the lower branches, and particularly the base of the lower branches. You can tell these sacrifice branches all originate from the bottom of lower branches. This way, they fatten the base of the lower branches without later on having very ugly cuts in the branches itself. It's not optimal, but it does work, and they do grow. I could tie them up more to aid these in extending, but this way it's nice and controllable, and in winter I'll cut these off and have a nice compact canopy with fat bases on my branches. Now if you look closely here at the trunk of this trident, you'll see some very big chop marks here. These are all from sacrifice branches which were used to develop the big trunk below. And now this top is growing out. It is creating lots and lots of power on this section, and here I hope to close the wounds over time. This just dropped the cut paste, which is now dried out, I can scar these wounds again and they'll continue closing for the rest of the season. Now if you look carefully here at this pot of this big maple tree, you'll see there's a bunch of stones sitting there. That is because of the enormous amount of wind that this sacrifice, which is almost 7 feet, so 2 meters tall, captures. The swaying in the wind will put extra strain on the roots. Normally the pot will topple over, but because of the roots, the pot more or less stays in place. Therefore, the roots will have to compensate for the swaying. This aids in developing stronger roots, a wider root base, and also adds wood to the base of the trunk. Because a tree trunk doesn't only grow because there is a lot of foliage, it also grows to create strength in the lower trunk to keep the tree up. So the more power it needs to absorb, the fatter the base can become and the stronger the roots. Of course, you need to work the roots, otherwise you just get 2 or 3 fat roots. So that is the 5th reason for sacrifice branches on a tree. There is the secret number 6, but that is related to the reason why I think sacrifice branches might be the wrong name. Because now if you look up along the sacrifice branch at this trunk, you see I don't intend to sacrifice anything. I'm air layering off parts of this sacrifice branch. This way I'm creating a new tree. And by wiring out the branches the year before you intend to cut it off, they already have nice and interesting shapes, giving you a nice foundation for a new bonsai. And now if you look here, I'm air layering this big trunk, which is basically the main leader, and this side branch I've kept in place. So later on I'm going to chop it off here and just have this thin branch with a thick base. An excellent start for a bonsai. And of course, this already has a bit of a shape. Now my bonsai math is not all that great because I think this is one reason that I have not counted before I started the video. And basically, when you have a bonsai and you prune it a lot and the roots are pruned and it is repotted, your tree might be a little bit weak. The plant might be struggling, but it is well ramified and you don't actually want to ruin the overall design and the thinness of the canopy. Now that is also a great point where you can say, I'm just going to take one branch, maybe all the way in the top or further down below, and I'm just going to let that run for the season. That will add tremendous amount of energy to the trunk, to the roots, to the overall health of your bonsai. So letting a sacrifice run for a season, keeping the rest of the tree well groomed for that season, will help you to regain energy, health, strength. In fact, you can actually develop your nebari by spreading out the roots nicely during repot time and then during the season let the sacrifice run, without ruining the basic outline of your tree and the ramification that's in place already. Of course, if I let this run for a couple of years and this is a little bit shaded, this will start to die off as well. So you need to find a balance. But letting this grow for the first half of the year or maybe the whole year, no problem. You get a very, very nice, healthy tree. Now how long you leave a sacrifice branch on, that's completely up to you. Basically, the longer you leave a sacrifice branch on, the more it aids in thickening part of a trunk or in developing the roots or in closing the wounds. But it also means you get a bigger scar later on when you do remove it. So that's a balance for you to decide upon. When to remove it? I am a big fan of removing big branches in middle of spring. The plant is up and running. It can respond directly to any things that you do. The risk of dieback along the trunk is a lot less. But hey, everybody has his own preference. This one's actually done. It's nice. Gorgeous color. This was Jelle, growing bonsai with a bunch of trees, explaining why do you use sacrifice branches, what are the benefits and how can you use them. It's now getting too windy, this tree is about to blow over, I'm going inside, you keep growing bonsai and see you next time.